start the recording, Tim. It's 2:00. I'm typically the one who starts webinars, and I have the delightful opportunity now to turn this over to Tim, who has hosted this event for us, so that he can do a proper introduction, and I'll continue to mute people as they come in.
Awesome. Well, it's 2:00 in the East, and thank you to everyone that has decided to join us today as a result of seeing this advertised in the Facebook group. I just want to introduce Pat Iyer. She's a legal nurse consulting business coach who runs a successful independent LNC business. In Pat's 35 years of experience as an LNC, she started, grew, and sold multi-million-dollar LNC businesses, and is currently working with attorneys. She's the author of more than 59 books, many of which are written for legal nurse consultants. Pat is a past president of the American Association of Legal Nurse Consultants, the AALNC. Her website is legalnursebusiness.com. She founded Legal Nurse Podcast in September of 2016, which has listeners in over 92 countries. Barbara Levin is an experienced medical, surgical, and orthopedic nursing expert witness. She is known for her thorough preparation and ability to withstand cross-examination. In 2022 alone, she has assisted attorneys to achieve more than $100 million for their clients. Barbara is the clinical scholar of an orthopedic trauma unit at Massachusetts General Hospital. Barbara recently completed a 3-year term as the chair of the Massachusetts Board of Registration of Nursing. She is also a past president of the AALNC. So we are honored and glad to have the two of you today. So let's get right to it. The client asked you, the LNC, to locate an expert witness for a liability case. What makes a clinician expert?
Well, I'll start off with a couple of the factors, and Barbara and I will take turns answering these questions. I think the biggest thing that is important for an LNC to consider is the expert board certified, particularly if that expert is a physician or has a certification from a nursing organization, if we're talking about a nursing expert. Those are the two primary types of experts who we are asked to locate. And that certification should be current. Sometimes in deposition, attorneys will ask experts, but probably more commonly defendants, how many times did it take you to pass that board certification? And that's always a little bit awkward. If the individual, particularly the defendant, had to go through that process several times. Barbara, do you want to talk or say anything about these components here?
The other aspect, one of the important questions to ask if you're asked to look for an expert is to ask about the status of their license. Is it current? What states are they licensed in? Have they ever had any board action or allegations filed against them in any of the states? This is very important information because you'd hate to see something from someone's past come up in trial and have your client be blindsided about it. There's a particular case that I did hear about, I was not involved, of an expert that was on the stand, and the history of drunk driving and patient negligence had come up, and that had never been disclosed to the attorneys. So that was a big bombshell in the courtroom.
I would imagine that that was really uncomfortable for the attorneys involved, particularly those who had not done their homework on that expert. Whoa.
Exactly.
I think another factor that is important to consider is, where did the expert go to medical school? If we're talking about physicians, I think it's more of an issue broadly than it is for nurses. Maybe for nurses, it could be diploma versus associate degree, but for physicians, it's clearly, were you smart enough to get accepted into a medical college in the United States, or did you have to go offshore and get educated, particularly in the Caribbean? There is a negative connotation associated with going to school in the Caribbean, even though it might have been a wonderful experience for that medical class. It implies to attorneys, you couldn't cut it by American standards. You must have been towards the bottom of your class, and that's why you had to go to medical school overseas. Another factor, and this comes in with accents in particular, is this a foreign-born expert who has a heavy accent that might make it difficult for the jury to understand? And it's not fair to experts to make assumptions that because they have a name that clearly looks foreign, however you're defining that, they might be American-born and have flawless English. That's why it's important to have a conversation with the expert and be thinking about that as you're talking to that person.
And how well did you understand the conversation? What information are you sharing with the potential expert? This is something that you would learn from your attorney client. How much of the case or the description are you to share? There have been some times that the attorneys don't want any parts of the cases shared. They don't want the experts to know whether they're working on a plaintiff or a defense case, but some things are important to know about, and that is to make sure the name of the facility is shared, perhaps the name of the defendants are shared, because you want to make sure that there are no conflicts of interest with that potential expert.
Yeah, and those are key points, because the attorney doesn't want you to share a whole bunch of information about the case with somebody who might already be retained on the other side. So that's why it's important right in the beginning for the expert to know the case name and the defendants. If we think a little bit more about location of experts, I practiced in the Northeast. I continue to run a legal nurse consulting business that's based in the Northeast in Florida. And there are some very strong regional preferences in parts of the country. I was told by my Northeast attorneys that it was undesirable for me to accept any expert or to present any expert who was west of the Mississippi, and God forbid they should be all the way in California from New Jersey. That was one of the expressions. You had to go all the way to California to get that expert. I testified once in a courtroom in Michigan, and the opposing counsel said, "You came all the way from New Jersey to Michigan. There are no other qualified experts between here and New Jersey." That was a rather unfair question to ask me, since the attorney picked me and had confidence in my skills, but I came up with some suitable response in that moment. I've also had attorneys in the South say that they don't want experts from New York who have heavy New York accents, that New York accents don't play well in the South. That may be something that has changed, but that was a real strong preference. I recommend that when you're talking to attorneys, you say, is there any particular part of the country you want me to focus on when I'm looking for experts? And usually they'll say, well, of course, just in my state. But the problem with that is that the particularly physician experts have a small society, especially with certain types of specialties. The well-known prominent neurosurgeon who's being sued, it's going to be challenging to find a plaintiff expert against that neurosurgeon. And if you say just in that state, these neurosurgeons know each other. They attend meetings, they're on Zoom calls, they're on listservs. They don't want to be involved, particularly for plaintiff cases.
There are additional reasons that the attorneys may not want you going across the country or a great distance away to locate the experts, and that includes finances. The further you go, there's more expenses. airline tickets, travel time, to bring those particular experts in. So that's one thing. There are some states that require their experts to be contiguous to the state that the incident occurred in. And that is an important question to ask, especially the Southern attorneys, if that is a requirement for them. I have seen that. I believe it's Tennessee, but certainly double check with your clients, anybody in the South, for what they're looking for.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Barbara. It is Tennessee. The expert has to be from a state that touches Tennessee. And fortunately, there are 7 or 8 states around Tennessee to give choices. Virginia has a strong preference that the expert have worked or be licensed or gone to school in Virginia or consulted with a Virginia expert. They're real picky about that. If you are practicing in New York, where Tim is located, New York has an interesting characteristic that they don't reveal the name of the expert to their adversary until they get into the courtroom. So there are people who sit in front of computers and say, let's see if I could figure this out. If this expert went to medical school at Harvard and did a residency at Yale, can I kind of backtrack and figure out who this person is? Because the attorney reveals just a few little clues, but never says the name. So there's no depositions of experts in New York. And we, in New Jersey, of course, would call it trial by ambush, because the person could literally walk in the courtroom and the other side has no opportunity to have done any pre-work investigation about that expert. What are some other factors that LNC should consider, Barbara?
Some experts list themselves in directories or they may advertise. And there are times that your clients may not want somebody that's advertising. But what is considered advertising? Is it posting blog posts? Is it advertising on LinkedIn? So find out specifically what that means, because there are attorneys that may consider having your own website as a form of advertising. And while that can be a form of advertising, depends what you put on that post. If you are putting your background, types of work that you're doing, types of work that and publications that you have been published in, it's great to get your name out there, and certainly networking with your colleagues as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting, tricky point about advertising as experts, because it used to have such a negative connotation. Oh, the expert advertises. And yet attorneys advertise, doctors advertise. Some of the stigma has significantly lessened. And the expert who does have a website can turn around and say, well, you know, Mr. Attorney, you have a website as well. So there's ways to neutralize that. What I see is that some states also have very specific requirements about active practice. Has the expert been practicing within X number of years of the incident? And that can vary anywhere from 1 to 5 years, depending upon the state. In some states, there are no requirements at all. There's nothing that's defined, but it has become common practice to expect that the expert to be in active clinical practice or recently retired or working as a faculty of an accredited school. There are some medical schools and nursing schools where accreditation is kind of shaky or maybe non-existent. And Barbara, who was involved in making some of those decisions when she was on the board of nursing in Massachusetts, saw firsthand what happens when a school loses its accreditation, and all the devastation that happens to the students as a result of that.
That's so true. And when you are looking for your experts, ask them how many hours a week they are working clinically, or is it a month? I have seen experts state that they work 1 shift a month. They're doing per diem 1 shift a month. Is that acceptable for your client? What type of case is it? And that's something really important to hone in on. Has your expert been published on the topic area? So let's say your client has informed you they need the best expert that has dealt with compartment syndrome, or perhaps a missed or absent neurovascular assessments. Your attorney would find it helpful. Are you okay? Oh, I saw Tim lifting his arms up. I would think that your attorney would find it helpful if you located an expert who actually has been published in those areas. Something that's important too, can your expert teach? Can your expert spend time explaining to you when you're speaking with them about whatever the topic is? Are they articulate? Are they able to share forth? Are they able to share in a way that you believe your client and perhaps in the future a jury would be able to understand?
Another factor that we've run into, we being myself and people who worked with me when I was running my full-time business, was that there were some experts who did work for only one side. And they got a little defensive about it when I would ask, well, I'm do 95% of my work for plaintiffs. I would work for defendants if they asked me. They know that there is a desirability to have evenly balanced time working for both plaintiff and defense. When you are working in a field, you want to be seen as objective and credible for both sides, so that the attorney who's hired expert A and then sees that expert against her in a case knows that that person was well-founded, well-educated, credible, and it's harder to attack credibility of that expert when that attorney has hired that person to help her on her cases. A 50-50 split is ideal. Sometimes experts will say 60-40 or 70-30, but when it gets to 90-95% for one side, that's a problem in terms of identifying the objectivity and credibility of that expert.
I agree with that. It's so important to have people that are well balanced for your experts. And when we were talking earlier about certifications and publications, one way that if you are given the task of locating an expert, find out what the topic is, do your homework by pulling articles to find out who's actually been published on these particular topics, who are the common authors, what have they had to say? And some of the topics are so specific that there may only be a handful of experts to address that particular topic, such as, maybe it's electrophysiology having to do with one little component of the heart, and there's only a few people in the country that have performed particular procedures on that. So that's a good starting place, is to do some research.
Yeah, that's a great point, Barbara. I'm working on a case now where we found an expert because of her publications on a particularly narrow topic, and the attorney was able to hire her for that case. Tim, before we go on to the next question, I thought we would stop here to see, since we're going to move beyond qualifications and talk more about the process of finding an expert. Let's see if anyone has any questions. If you go down to the bottom of your screen, if you're on a computer, you should see a little reactions button where you can raise your digital hand. The reactions button looks like a face with a cross coming out of its head for reasons that are unclear to me as I stare at this symbol and think, what does that mean? And if you've got something you'd like to ask us, let's do that now and give you an opportunity to ask a question before we move on. And I'm not seeing any hands going up, so I'm going to assume that you're good. Tim, is there something
What
else you
I've
can ask us?
learned from that is basically, I mean, that was excellent of the two of you, is its two main points. Is not only their educational qualifications, this is what I'm just adding, is how their qualifications to present into the courtroom and present to the client are just as equal as their education is, I think, a summary to what I picked up from all that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. And it's sometimes very challenging to get that impression in an initial conversation with an expert. The attorney's making a huge investment in that expert and wants that person to be a teacher and to be knowledgeable, to be able to think on their feet and withstand cross-examination and to come across professionally. One of my clients told me that his paralegal went to the airport to pick up an expert in Kentucky, and the expert came off the plane in flip-flops and shorts and was wearing a ponytail. It was a man. And immediately the law firm was, oh my God, what have we gotten ourselves into? And they were going directly from the airport to the courtroom.
Wow.
The expert said, now, let's relax. I know what I'm doing. And went on the stand and testified beautifully. But they were horrified by his appearance. And the jury had to be able to look beyond how he was dressed in a very conservative field. You know, you don't see people going into the courtroom dressed like that, but was able to ride it over. Well, that was a big gamble. And I don't think that the attorney would ever use that expert again, based on breaking some of the fundamental unwritten rules about how you comport yourself in the courtroom.
Unfortunately, in society, and it's everyone, books are judged by their cover, you know, is the first impression. So that's a good point. All right.
Another big question that's asked too is, has the expert provided care to that patient population?
Sure.
And that's a really important one.
Well,
If
let's
I can ask a quick go ahead.
Question, Tim, before we move on.
Oh, sure.
I know I just interrupted you.
No, you're okay. Zoom.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Let's see. So my question is, you work hard to find the expert witness when the attorney has been difficult to deal with, when you're trying to ask all these questions that you guys just previously talked about. And how do you deal with their personality when they're jerks, when you're trying to get all the information you need so that you can do your research and get the proper expert when the attorney is difficult to deal with?
Can you define difficult to deal with, Jessica?
I tried to have phone conversations and I would end up leaving voicemails. So then I would email, hello, John Doe, I am emailing to confirm you received your voicemail that I left regarding XYZ case. And I would like to discuss this with you. How does 10:30 on Thursday work? And when he would reply, he would say, I'm busy. I'm in trial. It's the weekend. I don't communicate on Saturdays. I don't communicate after 5. So it took over a month to finally, for him to say, this is what I want.
Had he hired you to locate the experts to begin with? Correct. But he wasn't giving you any information.
No, and when he was just very snotty. And so, this has been 4 months ago. And he finally took the person I sent. I just heard from her yesterday that she finally received the retainer. And I'm a little bit nervous to follow up with him. I usually follow up with everyone and say, how you doing? How's it going? How can I help you? But I don't even want any more cases from him. He was such a jerk. And he's not going to be the only jerk. I mean, there's surgeons out there that are jerks. And so there's attorneys out there that are jerks.
I think letting him know that you want to provide the best expert for him, and thus you need to have a conversation with him and putting it in his lap instead of doing all the work, because you need to find out more. It sounds like you need to find out more information, and that's been frustrating for you.
Right. I tried that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to help you.
It's an interesting problem, Jessica, because usually attorneys don't behave that way. They want the best qualified expert. They know how much money is involved in that decision. It sounds to me, not knowing anything more, that you unfortunately stepped into a highly stressed individual's life who had limited communication skills. What I might have done in that situation is to write a letter or an email and summarize where I was in the expert witness location process and say, here are some qualities that I think are important to you. Please check off the ones that apply, or give me something that states specifically what you value in an expert, or if it's a question of fees or location or education, something that he could just quickly respond to, since it sounds like he didn't want to talk on the phone.
Or email, or meet in person, or anything. So I kind of did that. I said, what would you like? I would suggest X, Y, and Z. And I didn't get a response, but I like what you said. I like the check mark thing.
In extreme circumstances, when an attorney is very difficult, I have given them a black flag icon that says, I will never work with this individual again. They have to be pretty extreme to get that. And usually it's around issues of payment, trying to cut down on invoices, refusing to pay rush fees, being very abrasive and obnoxious. The vast majority of attorneys are not like that. And it's unfortunate that this man came into your life, but it's your choice whether you want to work with him again. It's totally up to you. Tiffany, I see your hand is up.
Hi, everyone.
Good afternoon. We hear you.
Good afternoon.
Hear you.
You can hear me. I'm driving. Sorry. Just a quick question. I don't know if I'm jumping the gun. So if we locate an expert witness, and of course they will produce a CV, right? Stating they have XYZ experience, they can do, whatever they say that they do. Just example, OB case, GYN. That's not my field, so I would have to find someone in that area. What would be like the best way, or like an interview process for me to validate what that expert is telling me is accurate information? Like, regards to their background, is it like, specific questions? Like, how would I know if they're telling me right and wrong besides, doing some baseline research? But is there anything or, a way to go about it?
Barbara, from your experience in the Board of Nursing, do you know if they ever got requests in this situation to validate somebody had an active license who would be considered as an expert?
So the active license requests, anybody can go online. If you're looking to see if a nurse has an active license, or if they've had any board complaints or action taken against their license, that would actually be online for you to see. And that's under nurses, or you can go under the individual state Board of Nursing. The Board of Medicine also publishes as well to see if an individual has an active license, or again, if there's been any action taken against their license. So while you'll be receiving the CV, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes about CVs and fee schedules, you can check those ways to see that they're active, but also asking them specifically, about their license. On their CV, you're going to see what associations that they're members of. Now, you would hope that an individual CV will be current. I did see a situation in one of the trials that I was involved in that opposing counsel's expert, her CV was not current, and she stated that she was members of associations and had publications that she actually was not involved in. And we were able to bring that forward during the trial. Quite embarrassing for the expert. I've only seen that happen once.
That's horrible. Wow. Okay. Would there be, besides just the license, any, I guess, questions in regards to their knowledge base?
Yes, if you are given a specific topic and the attorney said, and you mentioned this is OB and it has to do with, perhaps there was a delay in delivering the baby, or maybe there was a placenta abruptia. Asking questions, if you're able to take those topic areas and present them to your expert and find out, what is your expert's experience with that? Have they had that happen to them? Have they, also asked, have you been published on the topic? A few things. Are they teaching about the topic, about potential complications during OB cases?
Somebody
Thank
who
you.
is
That
an
was
expert, Tiffany,
helpful.
also will tend to volunteer that information as you're talking to them. They will say, in my practice, I deal with this issue, dozens of times a year, or hundreds of times a year, because they want to establish that they are knowledgeable. But if they don't volunteer the information, that's part of your vetting process. And there's also an organization that if you Google, is my doctor board certified? There is a website whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, but where you could look up the name of a doctor in a specific specialty geographic region, and it will tell you whether they are board certified. And that's another way to validate credentials.
Thank you.
I have a
Thank
general
you.
question, if that's all right, unless if Tiffany's not finished.
I'm done, Tim. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Welcome.
I've had this in the past where my frequent clients, I have experts in, say, my Rolodex that have their information. An attorney says, hey, can you just give me one of your experts? I just want an orthopedic, and I'll call them. I just basically hand over the information. I don't really charge a fee for that. I was just wondering if you thought that's a chargeable expense, or is it just up to me? I mean, I didn't do any other work than yep, here's the name, email address, and here's their phone number.
Well, there's two levels of looking at that. One is, do you want to do it to maintain goodwill? And secondly,
that's why.
And secondly, do you want to do it to generate revenue?
Right.
And both are noble goals. If you want to do the generate revenue process, then I never looked at it as I just have to open up my computer and check my database, or walk over to a bookcase and take a binder off the shelf back when things were less digital. There was still work involved in terms of getting an updated CV, going through the case with the expert, making sure the expert was available, no conflict of interest, presenting those credentials to the attorney. In that case, it would be most likely a flat expert witness location fee. So yes, it looks like it's simple because it's a much quicker search, but in a way you're compensating yourself for all the work that you had to do the first time you found that expert, and all of your knowledge in terms of sifting out who is the right person for that attorney. There were days that I have and still do offer experts at no charge. But typically, if you look at it from a financial perspective, that is a billable service. And your current clients might be used to the fact that Tim is going to do this for me, but new clients are not. And that might be where you'd want to question your ability to make that a revenue generating activity.
The situation I'm referring to was a long-time client. I figured that was the response, but that was my, experience.
And giving long-term clients an occasional freebie is wonderful for client retention and loyalty and devotion to your business. That's a very strategic decision to make. But you wouldn't want to do it with a new guy or woman who called up and said, hey, Tim, just give me a name. That's all I need is just a name. Well, no, it's more than that.
Exactly.
Great question.
All right. We can move on here a little bit more. So why does your client want, if we haven't addressed this already, a like expert, such as an expert with the same credentials like an MD? You see the DOs, the osteopathic docs, and things like that.
Maybe Barbara could clarify for us, what is the difference between an MD and an osteopath?
Well, the amount of medical school and training that they've had. Yes, they're both performing orthopedic surgery, but there are differences. So the attorney, sometimes they'll want, as we discussed, the like experts. They may not want a PhD nurse testifying against their diploma nurse who was, if they're the defendant in the case. They may not want that expert. They want somebody who's a like expert, or they may want an LPN testifying against an LPN. So finding out, education backgrounds, they may want bachelors with bachelors. At times, the masters or the PhD nurses are not necessarily practicing at the bedside anymore. They may be more involved in research. And so the attorneys, for reasons of clinical practice, may want the nurse that's at the bedside to testify against the nurse at the bedside with the same credentials. And also, if possible, the same certifications with their like backgrounds. So they can talk the same talk, walk the same walk.
Yeah, another thing that I have seen is that sometimes attorneys, although it's not common, will say, oh, I'll have a physician testify about the nurse practitioner because doctors supervise nurse practitioners and therefore they are credible experts. And that's a real challenge in many states because the courts have increasingly recognized the differences between doctors and nurse practitioners, doctors and nurses, and their adversary is going to challenge them. Pretty likely they're going to challenge them and say, that person is not the right expert in this case. You need to find somebody different.
Very true. Now, for nurses, we are guided by the Nurse Practice Acts in each of the states, which includes information about the nursing process and also supervision. So nurses can testify with regard to nursing assistants because nurses are overseeing the practice of the nursing assistant. Was the right task given to the nursing assistant? Have they been trained on that topic? Are they doing something, whatever task it is, that's within the scope of the facility and their practice as a nursing assistant? So that would be looked at. Now, nursing assistants, while they do take vital signs, this is a good example, and they may record the vital signs, it's still ultimately the role of the registered nurse to review the vital signs that have been taken, because the nursing assistants, while they may learn some of the basics with normal versus abnormal, it's the registered nurse who has the critical thinking skills. And the expectation is to review the vital signs, determine if they need to change their plan of care by reassessing the patient and reporting any differences as examples.
I see a message from Sharon in the chat. And I will read it for those of you who are not on the computer. She has a question about how best to differentiate between being available for background work only versus a testifying expert, how best to state this on the phone or even on the website or marketing materials. That's a critical question, Sharon, to ask, especially when an attorney contacts you, because sometimes attorneys think a nurse is a nurse is a nurse. Barbara can testify about, she's a nurse, so therefore she can testify about OB and pediatrics and home care and IV therapy. And no, there's a limited perspective because of our specialties. But sometimes an attorney says, I'm talking to a legal nurse consultant, therefore that person must be an expert. And that's another no, to clarify right in the beginning, the type of role that you provide. On a website, it's pretty straightforward to say, I provide expert testimony in the area of orthopedic nursing, for example, as opposed to I provide consulting services to attorneys, and then clarify what you are offering. I have talked to nurses who have gotten into a case and then have been horrified to find out that the attorney expected them to be an expert and write a report or sign an affidavit of merit, and they had no intention of being in that role, and therefore they've gotten themselves into a hole. They have billable hours they put into a case, and the attorney with a misunderstanding about the role. Did you want to add anything to this, Barbara?
Understanding really what your role is key when you're hired. Educating your attorney about what you can do for them, as if you are the consulting legal nurse, perhaps you can offer them that you can perform research for them, chronologies, you can offer education to the attorneys. There's so many things that you can do for them. And one of them, you're not putting yourself out there as the expert, letting them know that you won't be testifying.
Thank you. May I elaborate a little bit on my question very briefly?
Sure.
I just feel that, I'm sorry, there's noise outside. When you are offering yourself as a legal nurse consultant, you do have specialties, and you know, you may feel comfortable on those, but my talents tend to lie in the investigative background, digging, research, you know, arena. So it might be good to highlight that as well to them. So as part of your marketing as well. And then just to, I guess we're going to get into the process about how to get a medical expert for them next.
We are.
Okay, thank you. I'm fairly new at this, so thank you.
And
We're happy
before
to
we
have
get
you.
into that, we wanted to make sure that you are all familiar with the link that gives you information about the conference that Barbara and I are planning October 27, 28, and 29. This is a 3-day online conference specifically designed for nurses who want to grow their LNC businesses. It is an opportunity to network with other legal nurse consultants, learn the latest techniques, and to feel support, because this is often a lonely profession. We're scattered all over the country, and it's often not possible for us to meet in person with other legal nurse consultants. Barbara and I are now on our 6th online course that we've created specifically to provide updated knowledge and networking for legal nurse consultants. And Tim has been kind enough to be one of the people who's helping us to promote this program. We have a link that is specific to him, which I will type into the chat since I am not pulling it up right now. I'll stop that share. The link for the conference is http://bit.ly, B-I-T-L-Y. It's bit.ly. It's a bit.ly link. And then it's Tim LNC 6. So it's bit.ly, bit.ly/Tim LNC 6. We capitalize LNC because there's an unfortunate problem in our culture that people see a capital L, they can differentiate it. They see a capital I and they think it is an L. And this is telling you from my perspective of marrying a man from India with a last name of Iyer. There are many people who see that capital I as a capital L. Now tell me, how well would that go over in the legal system? If I walked into the courtroom and they said, raise your right hand, Nurse Liar. Oh, no, no. So luckily the court reporter always says, would you say and spell your name for the jury? And that dispels any problem right from the beginning. Barbara, did you want to touch on some of the subjects that we're covering in the conference?
I do, and I also want you to put it in the chat. We didn't say, oh, here it is. Great.
Yeah, I didn't
great.
hit enter.
So we're so excited to invite you to our 6th conference, and it's an ultimate legal nurse consulting conference. We have received so many great comments. Pat and I have been taking the pulse of legal nurses all over the United States, and we've also communicated with others up in Canada to determine what are the needs, what does everybody want. We have individuals who are starting their practice, and we have others that are very experienced. So we want to re-energize you with great support. We have people that are going to present, speakers on business, on financial advice. We have attorneys who will present as well. And one of the topics is has to do with understanding and helping to locate the pearls of the electronic medical record and the audit trails, as well as the telephone. So attorney Megan Shore is going to present quite an eye-opening presentation, and I encourage all of you to join there. We also have Dan Capellan, and he is going to address leadership skills to help you increase your value and impact. And that will help you with your clients, as well as certainly working on your cases. We have Jamie Gary. She is a legal nurse consultant. She is also a nurse educator, and she has gone back and has become a trained mediator. And she is actually mediating cases to help them resolve. She'll be co-presenting with me on When the Finger Pointing Ends, Mediation and the Legal Nurse Consultant. We have another attorney that will present, and that's attorney Jordan Stanton. He will address unraveling a twisted tragedy. He and I are going to offer a case presentation. It's a real case, and we actually are going to show video clips of testimony. So you will hear about the attorney's role, the expert role, learn more about how to locate standards of care, and so much more. This conference, we will also have a panel of experts present on advanced practice and how have they tips in their practice. And one includes an attorney, and she's also a legal nurse consultant, and that is Arlene Klepatsky, Valerie Lane, and Marianne Cosby. They will be able to address your questions and also talk about their specific fields. We have so many incredible speakers, and I want Pat to talk about her role and her presentations as well. But I also want to share with you, if you've attended any of our past conferences, we have some new ideas for this conference, and that includes laser coaching and VIP practice. So we look forward to seeing you join our conference. Pat, I'd like you to talk about the topics that you will be presenting to the group.
I will be focusing on helping you with specialized knowledge to be able to do some video marketing. If you look at a Google search on how much of our marketing is done through video, you would be astounded by the increase in the numbers of videos that are on websites, that are on YouTube channels. The numbers are mind-boggling. And this is the way that attorneys are absorbing their impressions about you as a potential person to help them with their cases. So I'll be laying some foundational work at this conference to help you identify this as an opportunity for you to be able to take on, which very few of your competitors are embracing, which means you have the opportunity to get the attention of the attorneys you want to work with. And I think, Tim, to make sure everybody knows that link, I've put it in the chat. Let me say it again because it won't appear in the recording. It is bit.ly/Tim, capital T, small I-M, capital LNC, and the number 6. So it's all together, Tim LNC 6.
Thank you. And I'll have that in the Facebook group on numerous postings. The link will be provided.
Well, I think at this point we have a choice. We can see if there's anyone else with questions. We could talk a little bit about identifying experts. We want to be respectful of your time and keep this to about an hour. How about if you put in the chat, if you would like Barbara and I to come back and offer you another part of working with experts and what makes desirable experts. If you would like another session like this, put it in the chat. And if there's interest, Tim, we'll be happy to schedule that.
Absolutely.
All right. Then I think the question that was raised earlier was, are we going to get into how you find experts? And we've talked a little bit about that related to publications. But in addition, there are networking opportunities that you have as a legal nurse consultant, talking with the experts who you currently work with to have them help you. Do you know an expert in this field? People, you never know who their connections are. It's like, if you remember, or if you think about an atom where you've got a person in the center and all of these little cells, these little particles are floating around. I've got to get my molecular biology in here somehow. If you think about the ways that we're connected to each other, you don't know who knows who. So you can make assumptions, but without saying anything, you don't know who's connected. My best example of this is a woman I coached who was a legal nurse consultant who went to the dentist to get her teeth cleaned. And she had her pens and her notepads. And she said to the receptionist, I'm in my new business now. This is what I'm doing. And the receptionist said, my brother is an attorney. He handles car crash cases. Is that the kind of attorney you want to work with? She said, oh, yes. And there was a man sitting waiting to be called in the back in the waiting room. He overheard the conversation. He had a wife who was an attorney who handled personal injury cases. So she walked in to get her teeth cleaned. She walked out with 2 prospects. That's one of the messages I wanted to leave you with, is always talk to everybody about your business, and in connecting with people who are already experts for you or you found in the past. That's an easy way. Barbara, what would you like to add to that?
I would also like to add networking with your legal nurse colleagues. Attend our conference. There are opportunities and breakout sessions and networking that we promote. There are individuals who have actually found their experts or found their subcontractors right during our conference. Our conference is 3 days. And if you are, perhaps you're busy one of the days at work or wherever you are, if you purchase the VIP package, then you will be able to watch all of the sessions. They will be recorded for you. So you can attend live and also have the recordings. But I encourage you to network with your legal nurse colleagues. There are a variety of areas. Tim's, his platform, he's doing a lot of networking out there, and that's wonderful. Inviting us to present and invite you to our conference is another way. There are so many great opportunities out there for networking.
I encourage nurses to just in my Facebook group to always ask for anything LNC related, but especially for experts. And you'll see that from time to time. I'll always approve a post. Does anybody have an expert such and such that may fit this criteria? And a lot of times it goes filled.
And that's an excellent opportunity for you to take advantage of networking in Tim's group. Tim puts his energy and his soul into growing the group and making it a comfortable place and an opportunity to meet people from around the country. That's a perfect way for you to find people. A couple of other locations you might want to consider is LinkedIn. You can post within LinkedIn groups. LinkedIn groups are rejuvenating themselves after going through an active phase. Then they kind of went dormant and now they're picking up again.
Yeah.
But your most likely opportunity is going to be with people who know you, who want to help you out, who also see the opportunities to be able to share something with another expert who is looking for more cases. And they like to help you. They want to make sure that you succeed. So they're often very generous with their time.
Other areas you could consider attending other conferences as well. Perhaps if you're still clinical or you have an area that you're most interested in, attending those conferences, listening to those speakers, because they could be ultimately your future experts as well.
Yes, be a hoarder. Save those agendas for conferences. Do searches for experts. It's fairly easy to find physicians who are on staff in hospitals. They're on their websites of the hospitals, and sometimes attorneys have a great deal of difficulty figuring out how to find a nursing expert. You can't find out who's the director of the operating room at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan by going to the website, but you can find out who's the chief of surgery. So attorneys often turn to legal nurse consultants to find nursing experts, and that's a very profitable niche for legal nurse consultants. I think we have time for maybe one more question, Tim, before we leave. See if you can raise your hand or unmute yourself. And Sharon, I'm
think-
more. Yeah.
Hi, Pat. I think you just muted yourself. You were in the middle of a sentence.
I did. Sorry, I'm sending you my email message because you're looking for a mentor specializing in criminal cases and forensics, and I have somebody that I can refer you to.
That's
Christine,
awesome. Thank you.
you're welcome. Christine.
Piggybacking off of Sharon's earlier question regarding experts, is it best to get it in writing from the or to the attorney what your role will be specifically, whether you'll be behind the scenes versus if you're a testifying expert, or the particulars of what the attorney would like for you to do?
Yes, you will need to know that, Christine, because you want to send the appropriate fee agreement.
Okay.
Experts often charge at a much higher rate than behind the scenes consulting LNCs. And what you don't want is that surprise that we talked about earlier, where suddenly you're being flipped into an expert role. It also impacts what you put in writing, because if you are consulting and giving the attorney ideas for deposition questions and strategy, and then the attorney says, oh, now I want to make you my expert, then everything you've put in writing when you were consulting is now discoverable. And oh, the other side would just love to get his hands on what you have given the attorney. So you don't ever want to be switched from one role where your work product is protected to another role where it becomes discoverable. That's why whether you get it in writing or you get it over the phone, you're confirming with the attorney, my role in this case will be behind the scenes consulting, or my role in the case will be expert. And then you have the appropriate fee agreement that you send to the attorney, and you ask the attorney to sign and return to you before you start working on the case. That's when you have the most leverage to get it signed.
Thank you.
Tim, this has been wonderful. I thought that Barbara and I would have lots of time to go through every one of our pieces, and we are delighted to know that we can come back and share some more with the group.
It's an interesting topic, and there's always something of value when the two of you decide to share with a Zoom meeting with us. And I'm happy to do it.
Well, we're so happy to be here, and we're so happy to see all of the attendees. And
Yes.
certainly you're welcome to go back and view this video again. And if anyone has any questions, you're certainly welcome to contact us. My email is bjlevinlnc@gmail.com. I guess I could put it in there. Certainly, if you have any questions about our conference, please contact us as well. And we hope that you will join us.
I'm putting both of the emails in there.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you all for coming, spending your hour with us and asking your questions. And we're delighted to talk about this topic. It's a valuable skill that attorneys need, and knowing the fundamentals and knowing some of the nuances that we shared will help make you successful with happy clients who come back with more work.
And anyone's welcome to reach out to me at any time. And Tim Kane at medicallegalconnection.com, but you can message me on Facebook or numerous avenues, and I answer every message I get. I try to.
Thank you,
Perfect, Tim.
Tim. Thank you for having us. And thank
Sure.
you to all the attendees. We look forward to seeing you.
Bye.